previous speeches, my colleagues and I have been for the death penalty, advocating that the death penalty should continue to be present by the New Hampshire state legislature. My partners had made points such as how false convictions are highly unlikely, especially in New Hampshire, how it is important to public safety, and that the convict's punishment should fit the crime he committed. My opponents have been speaking against the death penalty, so I will be discussing some affirmative points they have made. The first thing that the affirmative side had been talking about were insufficient methods of execution. Jess had brought up that they had used more brutal methods such as hanging, electric chair, gun squad, and all of them are like way more brutal than what they use in New Hampshire, which is lethal injection. The suffering wouldn't be that horrid compared to them, and like lethal injections are similar to hospital anesthetics, which like the difference, it's just injecting it in your arm, but the difference is that you just won't wake up, and that doesn't sound very brutal to me, or torture compared to the other ones. So the death penalty provides another option. Also, the criminal was the one to get himself into the situation, and being locked up in jail for the rest of your life is more cruel and unusual than the death penalty is, which is actually something Sedona brought up. She had said that some inmates would prefer the death penalty instead of life in jail, so that the inmate should be sentenced to life instead of sentenced to death. This is because it would be more cruel than the death penalty itself. She was advocating for, which was anti-cruelty, so she would actually be contradicting herself in what she said. Something else that is probably caught the attention of a lot of you because it's widely used. It was the statement, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. But it's an optimistic outlook, but thinking realistically, the world's already blind. And it's because an eye for an eye is the culture of most of the world today, because a lot of cultures still use death penalty and always have, and most of the states use it too. So that's just the culture. And besides, with the slim percentages of executions in New Hampshire, a person who committed a crime bad enough to get the death penalty actually deserves it.
So a lot of people don't know the difference between a jail and a prison. A jail is for a place, or is a place for a person who has committed a crime and will only serve a short sentence. People who are waiting trial or haven't paid bail for a crime that they have committed. Most jails don't house that many inmates. While in jail, you have access to a bathroom, water, food, and depending on if you're in a lower security jail than others, you might get a chance to socialize with other inmates. You live a much more comfortable life than you do in prison and jail. People who are sentenced to prison have committed a crime that is, they have committed a high crime. Prison is a place where people can go to spend their entire life behind bars. They have high security in prisons, and prisoners are given little to no free rights in prison. In prison, prison guards are specially trained they're specially trained for a prison environment, which means they've been trained to break up a fight the right way without getting themselves or any other inmates hurt. It doesn't mean that they're just trained for breaking up fights. It also means that they're correctly trained to handle prison riots, prison escape, and a patient having mental breakdown because of the place that they are in. A few points brought up by the negative side in Kaya's speech, that prisoners are allowed to watch TV, socialize with others, and eat and drink when they feel they need to. That's true for jail, but not prison. What was described in yesterday's paper was a jail, not a prison. If someone was put into jail, they haven't committed a crime large enough to be housed in a prison, or they haven't been convicted of a crime or of said crime yet. If you're awaiting the death penalty, you wouldn't be in jail, you'd be in a prison. It was said that people fear nothing more than death. I personally disagree with that statement. I feel that some people, but not all, would rather die than serve a prison sentence. Most of you have probably heard of prisoners killing themselves in the past by hanging themselves in their cell. That tells me that a person would rather be dead than serve a prison sentence. But just because someone hangs himself in their cell doesn't mean that they wanted to die. They couldn't or weren't able to leave, and they felt that death was their only exit out. The death penalty, as stated before, is for those who commit crimes such as killing a police officer or any other person in the line of law enforcement. People who commit a crime such as murder in the first degree will be sentenced to either a life sentence in prison or the death penalty, depending on the state that you live in. Here in New Hampshire, if you commit a crime, you'll be sentenced to death. When a person is put on death row and it's their time to die, it is required for the family of the victims to witness the death of the prisoner. Tell me, is that not cruel and unusual? Forcing someone or a group of people to watch another person be injected with a lethal injection, or watch them get hanged. I find that cruel and unusual. I find it cruel and unusual that the family is required to watch that person die. They don't have a choice. Some people would like to see that person dead, but you think about the person. If you think about it, how many people would feel comfortable watching someone else die? That's the first half.
So far, I have made important points on behalf of arguing the affirmative side and discussing a couple points on my side's behalf. Now, speaking for the death penalty, I will discuss more affirmative points. Yesterday, it was like the topic of being a waste of money was brought up, but in New Hampshire, it is so infrequent that we get someone on death row that it really doesn't matter, like, about the money. And my partner said, expense shouldn't matter if something has to, like Kaya said, something that has to be done shouldn't matter how much money. Okay. And it was also brought up that yesterday a lot that it was cruel and unusual. The affirmative side claims that the death penalty is cruel and unusual, but in fact it is not. Throughout history and in today's culture around the world, the death penalty is being used, like I said before. This goes to show you that it's not unusual due to society viewpoint. It's also not unusual because a just society requires the death penalty for the taking of a life. From acu.com. Lethal injection is the more humane modern way for execution rather than the old brutal execution methods such as hanging, gun squads, electric chairs, and gas chambers, like I mentioned before. And lethal injection, again, doesn't let the criminal suffer, so it's not cruel. And now I will discuss what my opponent had just brought up. First of all, he didn't have any sources, and he didn't have any facts to back up what he said. And from what I know, the families aren't forced to watch their, family die, like the convict. They're not forced. He just didn't have sources. And he even said that some convicts would actually die than serving the prison sentence. So that does provide another option for them. And something else that was said yesterday was that there could be accidental murders from the convict, but I'm sure that going through court, they would figure out that that was an accidental murder was not intentional, and it wouldn't matter. And what I want you to remember is that the death penalty is completely fair in all ways and is necessary for public safety because the state should make sure that its first priority is the safety of its citizens. You, your family, and friends are all New Hampshire citizens. The death penalty is protecting your own safety as well as your loved ones. The negative side would like to reject the proposal. Be it resolved that the New Hampshire legislature repeal the death penalty.
The points that were just brought up by Alicia's speech was hanging is illegal in New Hampshire. That's wrong. It is a legal method of execution in New Hampshire. You may hang a person. Another thing about lethal injection. A lot of the time, prisoners' veins are damaged or hurt by drug abuse, and that makes it all the more painful for a person to be injected than it is to not have damaged veins. And again, in New Hampshire, if the death penalty is so infrequent, what does it matter to us if we don't have it, or if we do? It's not like in Texas. There are 43 people lined up on death row to be executed. Texas state government site. And death penalty is, in 1946, after World War II, there was a German Nazi scientist named Joseph Mengele who was responsible for the death of over 1 million people. And you're probably thinking, how is this relevant to the death penalty? Well, after World War II, he was sentenced to a life in confinement, just a plain white room with absolutely no human contact at all with him whatsoever. He had one room, 8 by 8 feet long, 5 doors to keep him enclosed in that room. The government said that he would be getting off too easy with the death penalty. The United States government thought that it was more of a punishment for him to live in this small room alone with absolutely no contact at all. Would you rather have had him be put to death, or should he have lived out should he have lived how he did? This is an event that was that wouldn't be considered cruel and unusual punishment, because 1, he was still alive. 2, he was serving out his sentence, but in life of confinement. The death penalty, it is cruel and unusual punishment. The death penalty should no longer be a way of punishment to prisoners. They should have to spend the rest of their lives in prison if it means they don't receive the death penalty. The death penalty is something I feel that should no longer be a way of punishing people for something they've done, because it doesn't teach them any lesson. They're dead. They can't learn anything from it.